As moms can forget that, they can give so completely, which is great. But then, who are you?
We see a lot of saints who are nuns or priests. We don't see a lot of saints that are moms.
That as something, especially as Catholics, that this is our greatest call, so we should be able to do it. And that comes along with a lot of fears. Does that mean that I'm like a bad mom or a bad Catholic?
How do you prepare your heart for motherhood?
This week on the Everyday Saint podcast, we are welcoming Sofia, who both works at the St. John Paul II National Shrine, but is also very knowledgeable in the topic today. We wanted to cover St. John Paul II's teachings and lessons about motherhood, but knowing that this podcast is mostly for high school and college age students, we really wanted to talk about motherhood and this vocation from the perspective of someone who is single, someone who's engaged, maybe looking towards the vocation of being a mom someday. So we answer your listener questions all about motherhood. Sofia is both an expert, on St. John Paul II, working at the shrine here, but also she's a mom herself. So she's going to drop some awesome wisdom today on the Everyday Saint podcast. And before we get started, I do want to remind you that I'm booking chastity presentations for the 2025 to 2026 school year. So please be sure to send this to any principal, faith formation coordinator, anyone that you know that works with a Catholic youth organization. I would love to speak to their teens all about chastity and striving for virtue. And without further ado, welcome back to the Everyday Saint podcast.
Welcome, Sofia.
Thank you, Eve. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, why don't you just start off by telling us about why this topic of motherhood and the family life was so important to Pope St. John Paul II?
That's a great question. And he wanted to be remembered as a Pope of the family. So among all his depth of wisdom, he talked about almost everything. But he thought that was the most important thing that he had talked about, the family. And so that I think that says a lot about what he thought and the importance that he gave to the Christian family, to the domestic church, as he and the popes usually call it. Maybe that relates to his own personal experience. He had a very tragic family history. His mom died when he was just 7 years old. He only had an older brother who died when he was 20, and he was also less than a teenager. And then so he was just then for a long time just his dad and him. And he always says that his dad was such an example of faith. He says that watching him pray, kneeling down before bed every day was kind of like a seminary for him, just prepared him for what God was calling him to do. So I think even if he had a very tragic, family life, in a way he didn't have a mother. He did, but she died when she was 7. I think he had this enormous idea, and he knew about how important that was. Even sometimes, we know for our personal experience that lacking something makes you value it a little bit more. So maybe that's how it all came to be. His dad also died when he was 20, and then he said, I never felt more alone. His only living relative was his dad, and then he died, and that's when he goes to Our Lady and asks her to adopt him as his child. And we know that Marian devotion and his love for Our Lady, maybe as a replacement for the mom that he lost so young, was something that also goes through all his life. So it's a very tragic personal experience, but that kind of determined his this conception of how important that was, maybe because he grew up without it. And then when he was a pastor in his church, the first, when he got ordained, and then he started doing a lot of ministry for young adults, and that included young couples, which he befriended and then accompanied through all the stages of being a young adult, being in discernment, being engaged, being married, starting to have children. And so he also had this this view, from a pastoral point of view, of accompanying young people from the beginning, but also including their married life. And in a very famous book that he has called Love and Responsibility, which he wrote before he was Pope, and it's about more like marriage, love, and responsibility, sexual ethics, if you want. He says that some people would say, how can a priest talk about, sex? They don't have any experience. But he also says, because of my ministry accompanying like young couples, I actually know more because he knows more. A priest can know more about the different experience, about different people. We only know about our own experience. Yes, it's a first-hand experience, but a priest can know about the experience of a lot of people. So it's not a first-hand, but it's very direct because when you're there in confession or spiritual guidance, you confide with your pastor. And I think he had this very pastoral view. And he saw the need of really accompanying young couples and talking with them about, what is God expecting of them. And, the theology of the body catechesis, the name that he put them, which I think is great, is the human love in the divine plan. So that's really what he was thinking about. What's the divine plan for human love? And I think all this, is really like the basis of his thought about marriage and couple and family life.
Yeah, wow, that's wonderful to hear, and such a good point to make too. And I like that you clarified this, priestly perspective on like how can a priest talk about family and motherhood?
Yeah.
They don't have that firsthand experience, but you're so right that everyone goes to him for advice, especially for Pope St. John Paul II. He was known as someone who people sought his advice for problems. So he really got to know the human heart from all these different backgrounds and people that he interacted with. And I'm curious what a couple key concepts or themes for Pope St. John Paul II were when it comes to motherhood and family life.
That's a great... So I think one key concept would be like the idea of self-gift. And of course, that is not a concept that he created. This is already in the Vatican Council, in the Second Vatican Council document, Gaudium Spes, where, it says that man can only be happy by, I'm not quoting by heart, so it's not the specific, but, by giving himself, by giving himself to others. Of course, John Paul II is said to have like a lot of influence on that document specific. So it was, or was it not, like his own term? But the idea of self-given, really family. So for the love between a man and a woman, the best love is the love of self-given, of giving yourself to other, and it's a love that imitates the love of Christ for His church, right? To give yourself to other as Christ gave himself for us and for the church. And then that's also the love that characterizes motherhood and fatherhood. It's a self-giving love. You're not expecting anything in return. You just give yourself to that child. So that is, I think, a key concept. And the other key concept could be, the communion of persons. And so he really says that, the love between a man and a woman is the best way to be image of God. So that love, because God is one and three, and it's a three-person, community of love, the love of a man and a woman can get as close as we can to that love experienced by the Holy Trinity, which is very theological, but also I think what we can get of it is, how he how he elevated human love. This is not like a second-tier thing. This is how we can imitate God. This is our vocation, our call as people that are as created by the self-giving love of God, and also to love. Created by love and to love. And so, I think those are the two key concepts that you can think about when you think how Pope John Paul II is thinking about family, spouse, love between the spouses, and also love for mothers and fathers and their children. It's a love that's self-given and that also imitates Christ and imitates the love of God.
Right, which is beautiful, right? Like, especially in our world today. And I know something that I've kind of thought about as, someone who's 21 and figuring out where my vocation is and whatnot. And just knowing that I don't have to be afraid to want to be a mom or afraid of like pursuing the family life in such a way that it's actually something that's a great honor in our world. And sometimes it's not always portrayed as that, depending on your background and
Yeah.
how you grew up. But I think it's really wonderful that this was a key touch point for Pope St. John Paul II. And it's really empowering in a lot of ways for women to hear this message and to know that motherhood is something that like a gift from God that he has given you, and a gift that we are women and can embrace that. And I would love to know from your perspective as a mom, how has Pope St. John Paul II really influenced your view on your vocation?
So it's a hard question, because it is true that sometimes this writing seems like really like theological. What does that mean, like in the practical thing, when I'm like changing a diaper, like
Right.
or like when I'm waking up at like 3 a.m. and I really don't feel like self-giving, But I think it's having in the back of the mind that even like what happens like in the day-to-day basis, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. Motherhood can be challenging. You're sleep deprived. You have to really, give yourself until it hurts. And sometimes you're angry. You're like, I don't want to give more. I'm just giving everything that I can. I just cannot do
There's
anything.
nothing left. Right.
But you have in the back of your mind, the first is that God sees you. He sees you. He sees your sacrifice. He sees this love, and then He called you for this, and He would not put anything on you that's like that you cannot do. So for me, at least, it's something that like discomfort. Even if I'm failing right now, I don't feel like I have it like everything together. I know this is what God called me to do. This is not just something that a circumstantial thing. I just met someone and then got married, and then the next step was just to have children, like a kind of like stairs of like things to do in my life. But this is actually God's call for me, and He values this family that we're creating. This is like our contribution to not just society but to the church. And then just thinking about what is the main mission of the family, and He says it's love. The mission of the family is love. And so that I think if you see it in certain perspective, can ease off a lot of like things we put on motherhood and family. Oh, are you nursing? Oh, you're not nursing. There's a lot and people that are mothers would know this. There's social expectations of what does a good mother do? What does a not good mother do? Or maybe what your own expectations, what I should be doing. They're watching too much TV, or they're like, I should be doing this thing. I should be doing like Montessori style play and not just this plastic like toy. But this is not the mission of the family. The mission of the family is love. And you do that, in the circumstances that God gave you, and you're doing the best that you can to love these children. So if you can, that gives a lot of comfort, I think, also to all the expectations that especially new moms can have. Am I doing things right? I'm not, are you loving your child? If you're loving your child, you're doing things right. And of course, everyone comes with their own, things that they carry from their own families, and we might need to heal that to really be able to love purely. But even if we don't, we are loving as much as we can. And we are making an effort to create this environment of love in our family. If we're doing that, we're doing a great job. If we are showing love to our children, that is, and to our spouses, of course. So for me, that is very empowering and also like comforting. I don't, it's fine. It's fine to do this because this is what I can do today. If that would make me like a more peaceful mom, I can have them watch TV for 2 hours while I'm in a meeting and then come back and do something else. And I'm not failing as a mom. I'm not failing because I'm giving them love. Mm-hmm. Of course, we don't want to do like an umbrella. This can be like we don't want to transform this in an umbrella excuse for like not doing anything. Well, I'm just giving them love. But, as a mom who's trying, and I think most of us like if not all of us are trying to give them your child the best that you can, it's just love. That's what they need. Just.
Right. And probably a lot of prayer goes into that too, right? Of, you know yourself well enough to know you need that break because you've spent time in prayer to like get to know yourself more, right? Yeah. Through the lens of God's love for you.
That's right. And sometimes and then prayer also comes into sometimes this is what I can do for this child, especially as children grow up. I can talk to them, but will they listen? I don't know. I can pray for them and hope, and trust that God will guide them. Sometimes that's the best I can do, and that's fine.
Right. Right. A lot of trust in God and
Yeah.
following his example as much as we
Yeah.
can, right? And leaning on him. And I did want to ask a couple of those questions really to give a foundation for where we're going with the rest of this conversation, because we were able to ask some of the Everyday Saint listeners about their questions about motherhood. And so they probably don't, I didn't even tell them what this was for quite yet. And they knew it was going to be in a podcast at some point about motherhood. But these are questions from our listeners. So we're kind of going to go through them one by one and give you the opportunity to answer. So very first one right out of the gates. How do you prepare your heart for motherhood?
I think this is a great question. I was thinking you gave me some of the questions before, and some of them, this one was one that, I think the first thing that popped into my mind was really, we first prepare ourselves to be good spouses, and this is the key, right? Because you create a family through love, to your spouse. So children are the fruit of love between man and woman. So really, I think, at least my answer would be, first you prepare yourself to love your spouse, and then that will organically overflow to your children as well. As you were saying, really the family's mission is to love, to keep and guard love, and sometimes, especially for moms, it can be, you start to think about motherhood, and then you kind of, I guess, get a little obsessed about it, and you cannot forget that your spouse is, your first call to love. Sometimes it can even seem intuitive, well, I should love more my kid, but really it's your spouse that God gave you, and then children are the fruit of that love. So that is, the order of love should be in that sense. So I would say just prepare yourself to love your spouse, and then once you achieve that, self-giving love with your spouse, it will organically flow from there, that you will also give yourselves to children and to loving your children. Children cannot be, your right or your the fulfillment of your desire, but it's a fruit of love. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in today's society, you see moms, who are hurting because they want to give this love to children that they don't have or they don't know, and then children just become this kind of check, or this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or this is what I want. My heart's desire, this is and it can become a little selfish. Mm-hmm. But so, if you prepare for this self-giving love to your spouse, then organically children will also be a fruit of that love. And you will give yourself also to the children that come along or don't come along. You cannot really control it. But but really the first move is to love your spouse. That is the first move. And that's how you prepare for motherhood, I think. Definitely. As much as you can. Right?
As much as you can, right?
As much as you can.
With not knowing anything about ever having any experience with it, right? And I think an important point you made there, too, is that you are meant to serve your children. Your children are not meant to serve you, mm-hmm. right? It is that self-giving love, and that's what you have to focus on first and foremost, and loving that spouse. So with that in mind, what can someone be doing now who's unmarried and even single be doing to prepare just for their vocation?
So I think, I would say openness. I think I saw that a little bit in the questions that were sent. Of course, you're single, and I remember this also, will I ever get married? I remember praying to find a spouse, to find someone that I can get married to. Being, vocation is always an answer to a call. So being open to what God will call you, and also trust the Lord. He has something prepared for you, and it's great. So if you come, with that trust, and then that I think eases off some of the anxiety of will I get married? Will I meet someone? Will I and once you get married, will I have children? You don't know. Just trust the Lord that He will do what's best for you, and that He has something guarded for you that's great, that's just for you. And so just be open to whatever He is bringing. Because, when you're single and you think, just be open to your vocation, whatever that might be. And some vocations might be harder to follow than others. That openness is like the first step of like also afterwards giving yourself to your vocation, either by loving a man, or by giving yourself to God, or by remaining single. You don't know what God has in mind for you. You just know it's going to be great. So just trusting the Lord. I think trying to pull out all the anxieties that society sometimes, and sometimes even the Catholic word, for moms, if I don't get married young, if I don't have a lot of children, sometimes without knowing, even like very good intentioned people can like put pressure on us, and so just trust the Lord. He knows what's best for you, and He has a plan. So if you're open heart, like your heart is open to whatever vocation He has in mind for you, I think that's the best preparation, because you also don't want to have like all your anxieties and expectations anytime you meet someone. Like, will he be the man? Like, no, just like he's off, We don't
take
know.
a second. Yeah.
We don't know. And you don't want to get, involved with someone just because you just want to get, you just want to be a mother. This is what I always wanted to do. That is not the way, just make a step back, open yourself to God, what God has for you. And I think that is once very attractive. Someone that knows, themselves, is like satisfied what they have to offer. They know they carry something within them that they can give to whoever God puts in their way and like signals to them. So I think that would be, just trust the Lord and be open to whatever vocation He is calling you. Just trust that He will call you for something.
Right.
Or He is calling you right now. Sometimes but just trust. He will make His way known to you.
Right, because each vocation is a gift of self. Like, that's the whole goal.
That's right.
Because that's what sainthood is a gift of self.
That's
so
right.
He's going to lead you to whatever gift of self is most fitting for your spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think this actually ties into our next question quite well, and kind of a personal anecdote. When I thought about this next question leading into it, I know a lot of people who, and including myself, like at one point, I sat down and made a list of all the qualities I'd want in a future spouse, and I'd pray over it. And I think in some ways it can be helpful, and I think at the time that I made the list, it was helpful for me. But sometimes it can be quite toxic, because now you're putting these expectations on who's the perfect person. And then as I was reflecting on that, I kind of turned it around and instead made a list for myself of the person that I wanted to be in my future vocation, whatever that is. And I think that's definitely where more of the focus needs to be on. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some specific virtues you think that people should cultivate before they find their vocation?
So I think, of course, there's like openness. One other thing, and I was thinking more like motherhood specific, but I think it can be both. One is humility. Right? You will not do everything right. So just like accept that from the beginning. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing the best as I can. I think in many ways, motherhood is like a bath of humility. I remember when I have 5 children and I'm expecting number 6. When I have my first daughter, she was a very easy baby. She slept like really good. She never cried. And my husband and I, we were thinking like, we are great parents. We know everything. Like, we just aced this. And then my second child came along and she was a nightmare. We weren't sleeping for like months. I remember being at the car one day driving and then suddenly thinking, I don't remember how I came here. I was just so sleep deprived. And I shouldn't be driving,
Yeah.
And then that was like kind of like a wake-up call. Like, you don't know anything. No, you had an easy child first, and now you realize, you don't know. You're learning, and that's fine. And you're doing the best you can. You're giving love. That's why the love between husband and wife can be very should be put first, because he's your teammate. He's the father. You are the mother. Both of you are raising your kids together. So humility, I think, is the first. But I mean, that could also be for other vocations as well. I don't know. Like, just going back to the list. I don't know what God wants for me. Maybe it's not this perfect man, it's probably not going to be actually this perfect man. It's probably going to be someone different, someone that has a lot of faults, as I do. But this is the person that God wants for me, that knows, that God knows that will make me happy. So humility is the first. I don't, just openness to God and humility, just like trusting His judgment and not so much our own expectations and also, anxieties about who should I date or who will love me. God loves me and He will provide and He will give me someone that will make me happy. So I would say, those two things. And the third maybe is like sense of humor. And I think that goes to like dating. Sometimes you go on a date and it's a disaster and it's good to laugh about it, to just laugh with your friends or even maybe laugh with a future spouse with whom you went to like a disaster first date, just laugh about it and just ease it off and it's fine. I think if we just take away some of the anxieties, laughing about it can like create this like more of a relaxed environment to like both date, and also raise children. If you, instead of when there's this child doing a tantrum about a stupid thing, if you can either get mad or you can also laugh about it or laugh about it with your spouse afterwards, even if you're still a little mad. But if you have that, that vision where, you're not taking yourself too serious and, just being humble and laughing about the challenges, that would make everything easier.
Definitely. And I'm curious now that we're kind of speaking on motherhood a little bit more, that is your life completely different after motherhood? Like, does everything change?
I think that, I was thinking a lot about this question. In a sense, yes, and in a sense, no. I do think that I'm the same person in like my interior, the same me in a way. But of course, it changes everything at the same time, It's both of them. And it kind of like relates to another questions that we had on like the sense of independence and, self-giving can be very challenging and it can even be painful to know that, you don't have the time, that your time doesn't belong to you anymore. That most of the times I'm driving and I have children behind me. I'm never even alone in my car. And that is, that can be challenging. But I'm the same person, I'm my own me and my style of motherhood will be also my own style. And I think that's why it's important that we go back to like, it's first a relationship between the spouses. You cannot be so like consumed by caring for your children, which is a very important task, that you kind of like forget yourself in a toxic way, not forget yourself in a positive way, in like you can, in the positive sense, you give yourself like willingly to others, but you cannot just like, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, right? But you cannot just like forget who you are and just become this like mom person that doesn't have any other interest in the word, and then your husband becomes kind of like a second role thing because you are a mom now, right? So I think it's a very hard thing to do. For me, I kept on working I don't think that that's like the best choice. I think that is like a discernment road for each mom, like what's best for them, for their own children. So, some moms really need to be working outside the home and they feel like their gifts needs to also be, shared with the word, and they would not be fulfilled only with the work inside the home. So I think that you should listen to that. If God gave you these gifts and you think you should share it, then go ahead. He wouldn't give you the gifts to and then make you feel like uncomfortable or like intention about them. However, if you think that, your best gifts are directed towards childbearing and raising kids and homemaking, that's also great. Each mom has her own path. But I think in both of them, there, as I was saying, there's like a positive self-giving and then can be like a toxic one where you just like forget who you are and then you don't know, you can't, you are a child of God, and God loves you as you are. So you should never forget that. For me, raising kids also mean, giving them what I am, who I am, and also, respecting who they are in their individuality. It's I don't think, it's a complex thing. So in a way, you keep on being yourself as a mom, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. It does. And I really like that's encouraging for me to hear, this too, because God gave us these strengths and a personality as well. And I think sometimes it's like we can get in our heads about like, oh, I have to be the mom that floats around the house, so peaceful. And kind of going back to even what you were saying about having a sense of humor and cultivating that as a virtue. Like having kids, they're funny. And they also do like really stupid things.
Yeah, and it's fine to laugh about it,
Right. It's fun to laugh about it and to still keep who you are and that personality. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that sense of independence and individuality while still being a mom. How do you hold on to that in a way that's healthy considering your vocation?
I think that would depend on like each mom and their path. I know for my in my own perspective, I'm more like academically oriented. So I was always, when my first one was 6 months old, I started my master's, and then when they were 1.5, I think 3 and 1.5, I started my PhD, and that took me 7 years. So in the way, during that road, I had other 2 children, so I always had like children while working more in academic and research. And the way it worked for me is like I was doing some things outside the home and some things inside the home. And I was lucky enough that I could, academic life can give you the flexibility of just, working half time. So I could be for both. So that really helped me in maintaining like a sense of like, this is a little bit of my space, not in the way that, society now sometimes talks about like, this is a mom's space. Or like now, you get home and get your, glass of wine. But yes, it is important to have like a little time for yourself, and also to have a time, and more important maybe, to have a little time with your spouse. Just to not forget that you are the one that he fell in love with, and so you don't want to lose that. And sometimes couples could lose that in the road of like, because child caring is so consuming that you can get lost in like the worries about this particular child, or this children. But he fell in love with you, and so you want to, in a little space of your heart, you want to be that person still. Or if you change, you want to change together to something that's better. Just a better way of yourself. And that's the same what we were saying. God loved you as you are, created you as you are, with your gifts, your wounds. Just value that for yourself, and value that as what you can give your children. I can give myself, but I need a self to give, right? If I don't have, if I don't have anything, if I'm totally like consumed, like everywhere, and then I don't have anything to give, like who, you want to give yourself in the different ways that can be, that can be working outside the home, that could be working inside the home. And maybe you're like a craft person, maybe you're a great cooker, maybe you're just a great listener, maybe the way you are. Maybe you have like a great sense of humor. Maybe you're like more of like the very peaceful mom. Maybe you tried homeschooling and it didn't work. But
Right.
that was my case. And I do admire a lot of my friends who are homeschooling. I don't, we don't just judge who they are, because God doesn't judge them. So who are we? But I think that idea, you want to give yourself, and you want to have that selfhood to give.
Yes, I love that point. You need to have a self to give yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Because moms can forget that. They can give so completely, which is great. But then who are you? Like who are you giving? Like what are you giving them, right?
Right. And probably paying attention to prayer and God throughout the day. I mean, there's so many quotes about like God in the pots and pans, and whatever it is, and seeing him there. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of comfort in that too, that in the busyness of being a mom, it's like, don't forget to connect with the source who's giving you this
Yes.
self. Because if you don't have that, then your gift of self isn't going to be as complete as you need it to be, or maybe even as easy as you need it
That's
to be
right.
in a lot
And
of ways.
you're right. And sometimes that means, waking up early. Sometimes it means like resigning sometime with your spouse and children, to go do a retreat. And that is fine. And something that I also wanted to say when you were saying that, and I forgot. I think it was that, well, yes, you were saying he is the source. No, we can have all these expectations also in our spouse and our children, and really the only one who fulfills our love is God. So if you that can if we have those, if we're seeking for this like whole and pure love in a source that will never be able to provide it, even my spouse, even if he is a self, even if he gives himself completely to me, he is a human being. In his very nature, he's fallen and redeemed, but also has his own wounds. So we will always have, there will always be a little things that tensions and, that comes from our, fallen nature. So if I have all these expectations and then I'm really hurt because my husband cannot give this full love that can only be found in God, then I will never be satisfied.
It's a great point. And do you want to go back to some of the questions that we have? Especially now, I think this is a nice take as a good example for us. How can I learn from Our Lady's example about motherhood?
I think when we were talking about, being open to God's vocation for you. I mean, was that, surprising? She was just, many people say, she was praying and then he suddenly like came to her.
Right.
You will be a mother. She was not even married, like,
Right.
so, that idea of like being open to what God brings to you first and trusting that if he's giving you this, he will give you the means to fulfill it. And so all those, anxieties about how can I be the greatest mom in the world, just trust God's plan for you and God's judgment. He gave you this child. He will provide the means to take care of it.
Definitely. And I think that speaks to a lot of like the fears about motherhood that people have. So I'd like to ask too, like, where do my doubts and fears about motherhood come from? The fear of losing myself, fear of vulnerability, fear of inadequacy, and how can I bring them to God for healing and for peace?
And this is, I'm so glad that this question came because I think sometimes we have this vision of motherhood, that as something, especially as Catholics, that, this is our greatest call. So we should be able to do it. And that comes along with a lot of fears. Like, what if I'm not, if I'm not able? What if I'm not ready? What if I don't feel ready or I don't feel, what if I have all these other gifts that I want to share with the world in like a professional setting? Does that mean that I'm like a bad mom or a bad Catholic? I'm not fulfilling. And I think many of these doubts and fears come from like our own family. As we said, the mission of the family is love. And it's where we learn to love as well. So, and this is not to say that our families of origin are like, some of them are broken, of course, and some of them are not, but we are all fallen nature. So we cannot love perfectly. Even if my mom loves me as much as she can, she's, even if as my spouse, even if my dad, we're everyone, we are human. And so our love is not perfect. And with that, comes wounds that we might have given our children and me and myself as a mom, right? Knowing that, I might not do a perfect job. I mean, I'm probably not going to do a perfect job. And so one part of the process is thinking like, why. I think it is important that we go back to our, domestic church. Where do we learn to love? And why do we, is there anything there that might have like brought this wound or brought this fear? Maybe, something that happened when I was a child that was no one's fault, but that made me felt inadequate. And now I'm bringing this to motherhood, and I now feel like, and it's like opening a wound that it's starting to bleed, and I feel like I will never be adequate enough for a child, and so I think that work of like going back and try to understand like where is this fear coming from, where is this wound coming from, and then ask God for healing. We can be healed, we were redeemed, so we can heal even very broken, very people coming from very broken families can be healed. So trusting the Lord, but I think that process is also necessary. We need to ask the Lord for healing of something that we know, of a wound that we know we have. So the first movement would be like looking into our wounds and like trying to find out where the source is, and then maybe that means having a spiritual director with whom you can talk about it. Maybe it's something that needs that needs professional psychological help, and that is also fine. That is fine. A spiritual director, maybe just in prayer about the little things that I know are more challenging for me, and then trusting the Lord to heal us and to make our love for our child and for our spouse as pure as it can be, knowing with humility that it will never be perfect. Right. And I think that is also, we cannot expect to be perfect. We'll just expect to just strive for perfection and strive for the best that we can give. But knowing that, it will not, and then maybe pray for that.
Right. I think it's really important for us to remind ourselves, too, that just because something takes so much work or so much unpacking like that, as you were saying, with these wounds that we have, that doesn't mean that, you're not made for that.
That's
or
right.
that opportunity is not open to you. Like, just because it takes work or help of other people doesn't mean that, God's like, oh, no, that means that it's not meant
broken.
for you. You're just too broken.
And even you cannot choose, every vocation needs this healing process. Mm-hmm. You cannot say, like, let me go to religious life because, like, I don't feel adequate for motherhood. That's not the choice. You're not, it's not because of fear of one that you want to go to the other. It's because God calls you for one or the other. Mm-hmm. So you will need to heal either way. If you want to give yourself completely to God, that love needs to be healed as well, in the same way that so one of the things that John Paul II said a lot is that the call for virginity for the kingdom of God is a call as it's kind of like the parallel or the mirror of a call to motherhood or fatherhood. If we don't value one, we won't value the other. So they're like together. So we cannot just choose one for fear of the other. Mm-hmm. That's not how the vocation process works.
Right.
You always will need to heal. And that healing you will always need to heal all throughout your life. You will not say, well, I'll get married at 30 because that will give me time to heal. No, that's not how it works. No. And then the person that loves you will love you with your wounds. And you will be wounded as well. So just be humble and know that this is how it will work.
Definitely. And we just have one last question here. And I want to preface this because I think it's going to kind of wrap up a lot of what we've been talking about and a lot of the orientation for this conversation in general, especially as I was looking through these questions, I wanted to ask about this because I think an example that we see a lot, especially in the church and just I think because of history, we see a lot of saints who are nuns or priests. We don't see a lot of saints that are moms.
Yeah.
And so I would love to know from your perspective, like, who are we meant to become during motherhood, and how does that work for our holiness?
Oh, that's a great question. And I want to first comment on your preface of why don't we see lots of saints that are moms? I think they're probably up there. We just don't recognize them officially, right? I think it took a long time for the church to realize, that motherhood was a vocation. Not to realizing they've always lived it, but to officially say that motherhood and fatherhood was an elevated vocation, the same as the call for religious life. Before the Vatican II, yes, we said that, but we kind of thought that, if you were saint, you will be a religious person. And really, Vatican II came to show that men and women from all vocations and from all stages of life, everyone is called to holiness. There are some great saints that are mothers. Saint Gianna Beretta Molla is one. And I don't know if you've ever read. I read her letters to his husband, and what I love.
Sweet.
Have you read it?
I haven't read. I've heard excerpts, but I haven't read the whole thing.
So
But
what
it's just
I
amazing to think of.
Yeah, and they were so, this is what I loved. And it might sound weird, but I love that they were so like normal.
Mm-hmm.
It was like not, it was not her, while their children were like perfectly playing, meditating on the virtues of God. It was not that. She was like doing, saying like, she was, for example, he went on a trip and she was like very afraid of flights. And she was like, please tell us when you're here, tell us if you're good. Tell us that. So like very like normal texting that you can have with your husband, like nothing really like, but with a close friendship with Jesus. And she would tell, I just went, I went to adoration and went to like, it was part of her life. But then, a very Italian mom, she was saying, oh, everyone says our kids are like the most beautiful in the, like, so she was just so proud. And at first it was like, is this a saint? It's just so normal. But that is why it's so important to see, because she was a normal mom and she could become a saint. And I think going back to your questions, I mean, we are called for holiness in whatever stages and in all paths, of life. And just trying to fulfill everything you do, motherhood, but also being a spouse. And if you're working outside the home in that work, if you're working inside the home in like what you're doing inside the home, all that strive to do with love. And that is exactly, that's how you get to sainthood. It's easier said than done, right? But I don't think that there's one path or the other that's like more or like one more preparation. Just grateful consideration of doing the best that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sofia, this has been really wonderful to hear your perspective and just your advice. Like I'm not really anywhere near being a mom at the moment, but this has just been, who knows who I'll meet, but it's just been really wonderful to hear this perspective from you and just this encouragement that motherhood is a way towards holiness, but also just like something so human in a lot of ways that God calls us to, and an embracing of who God wants us to be. And it's not a suppression of who we are, but a greater glorification of who God made us to be.
And if I want to like just to leave something to our listeners, is that hopefully, just to ease the anxieties of, because you're like, if you're in a younger and college age and you're thinking like, what will my life be like? Will I be a mother? Will I find someone to get married? And just ease the anxiety, trust the Lord. He has a plan for you. Just be open to that. And while you're there, try to strive for holiness in wherever you are, but trust the Lord and then be open to whatever he calls you. And hopefully that, but it's a hard exercise to do, but by trying to do that, you can ease a lot of the anxieties of like dating, being like in the first stages of like being engaged, being dating, being like starting to work outside your house or your family. Just trust the Lord. He has a good path for you. He has a great thing for you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.